Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Granick-Allen. We have a current issues panel with us today, a regular feature here on the show. And today we're covering many issues, including the COVID vaccine approval for kids 5 to 11 years old, a potential leadership review for Erin O'Toole, the federal Conservative leader, the Toronto Transit Union challenge to the workers' vaccine mandate, a potential boycott of the Beijing Olympics. And speaking of China, where is Peng Shuai, the Chinese tennis star who made allegations of sexual assault against a top Communist Party official? Lots to discuss, and joining me now to help me unpack it all is political commentators Hannah Solomon-Vey and Brock Stevenson, as well as Elliot Hughes, Senior Advisor with Summa Strategies. Thank you all for joining me today. Lots to talk about, and we're going to dive right into the recent COVID vaccine approval. Pfizer has now approved 5 to 11-year-olds can receive it's a watered-down dose, if you will, of the COVID vaccine. How does that sit with you, Elliot? We'll let you start this off.
Well, look, I think for parents, this is very welcome news. It's been a long time coming. I think there was a lot of fear out there as the school year got back underway that children had not been vaccinated yet. And it seems as though that's where we're seeing the highest rates of transmission, which is in younger kids. So obviously there's going to be some natural fear with any, vaccine like this, whether it be needles or just some questions around the vaccine itself. But seeing the results of, this happening in the States with kids getting vaccinated already, I think over 2 to 3 million kids have already gotten in the U.S. This is a welcome sign for parents, and hopefully we start to see similar numbers amongst kids as we've seen amongst adults here in Canada.
But has these vaccines, say in America, because they're a good test case, they've had it for a couple months, I guess, longer than Canada will have. Has it made an impact on cases? Has it actually made a dent into the studies, into the stats on this? Hannah?
Well, what we're seeing right now here in Canada and the U.S. that people who have been vaccinated against COVID, still are able to transmit COVID. They can still get it. It just reduces symptoms. So that means that we may have more potentially asymptomatic people going around because they've got the vaccine and they're not really sure, they're not really experiencing many symptoms. So they may be able to still spread it, which we know that the data is showing that. When it comes to children, I think parental rights are incredibly important. And that's the conversation that a lot of people are having because under the current state of emergency that we have here in Canada, kids 12 and under can get the vaccine without parental consent. They don't need any parental consent. So that's something that's concerning. But when we look at the death rate, though, amongst people 0 to 19 here in Canada, only about 17 people 0 to 19 have died from COVID since COVID was a thing. So sure, kids can transmit COVID, but they're not the ones that are dying from it. It's people who are 80 and above.
So Brock, I'm going to come to you here. Hannah brought up some good points, and she is correct that as long as a child shows capacity to consent, that they can give consent to their own treatment. So yes, technically even a 5-year-old, if they can show capacity, can consent to getting a vaccine without parental approval. Do you think with this climate, I mean, I don't ever in my lifetimes ever seen such an emphasis on a specific vaccine than we have right now in COVID. Do you think this climate is essentially opening the door to a lot of parental rights, parental authority violations?
Most provinces are actually taking steps to have parental consent be part of this. We haven't started vaccinating children in Canada here. It sounds like it's happening within a week with the 2.9 million doses arriving from overseas. I think the reason we've got this is the Canadian health authorities have said that benefits outweigh the possible risks. Unfortunately, I think the bigger question is going to be, like Peggy Noonan pointed out in the Wall Street Journal recently, it's turning into the annual flu shot in the case of the COVID vaccine, because we aren't going to lose masking anytime soon in Canada. I don't think society has turned the corner in feeling comfortable there, and the school children are actually doing a better job wearing their masks than most adults. I think that's where our real challenge is when are we going to return to anything close to the old normal?
I think that's a good point. I mean, Hannah, you brought this up as well. I think kids are actually pretty diligent with all their COVID protocols. And I've even had parents saying, you know what, we don't even care about the masks. It's the social distancing that's important. If we could just get bigger classrooms or reduce the class sizes, then we could have more space for not just COVID, but any of these viruses that come into the classroom. But I agree that sometimes there's a false sense of security. You get the vax, you can still transmit COVID. You can still get COVID. And maybe we'll pick this up right when we come back because I'm up against a commercial here. But are we not just giving people, especially with these children, a false sense of security with this vaccine? Almost like with a seatbelt. You wear a seatbelt, sometimes you might drive more recklessly because you feel that you're safe. We're going to take up this conversation in just a few moments. Welcome back. We're picking up our discussions with the current events panel. We're wrapping up our topic of the Pfizer vaccine that has recently been approved for the 5 to 11-year-old cohort. Before we went to break, I teased that maybe the vaccine might be giving some parents a false sense of security, that they can let their guard down because they feel they have this extra protection, but studies are showing that transmission still happens. You can still even get COVID. Is this going to give parents a false sense of security? What do you think about that, Elliot?
I don't suspect it will. I mean, I think, people are getting frustrated with the mask mandate, understandably so. I mean, sometimes it doesn't make any sense. You go to a restaurant, you have to wear it between the door and the table, but you're sitting at the table, you don't have to wear it. So there's some things that will, I think, shake out over the next couple of months and probably into 2022, and we start to get a little bit more rational about it. But look, I think, like seatbelts, we should be happy that we have this option for kids. And I don't know too many people who would necessarily think just because they have a seatbelt that they are going to drive more recklessly. I think what it is a great level of protection. And if we can get more people vaccinated, we then decrease our chances of spreading it. Yes, you can spread it even when you are vaccinated, but you decrease then the number of people in hospitals, and then you decrease the backlog of people who need things like surgeries for cancer or other surgeries that have been delayed for months and months and months because we have too many people in the ICUs being taken up by those who have COVID. This is a domino effect thing. So if we can start now and get more and more people vaccinated, it is a good thing overall.
Okay. And I don't want to belabor this, but I have one more point, and this is something that's been with me, and I've spoken to other political commentators about this, is we know that there is a risk. We know the FDA has put these warnings out with the Pfizer shot that we have seen cases of myocarditis and other concerns with children, with the younger cohort. Is it fair to put this responsibility, this burden on parents and children, that these children are seen as these super spreaders, that they're spreading the virus, but knowing that there is a very little risk they're going to die from COVID, but they could very well, again, small risk, but they still can, research is still coming out, that they could get myocarditis, which from what I've read is a lifelong condition. Is this fair to the kids to put their lives at risk for the rest of us? Hannah?
No, I don't think it's fair. And like you were mentioning, when there's any sort of risk, there has to be informed consent and there has to be choice. And I know lots of people say, well, you can choose to not get the vaccine, but then you can't expect to participate in society. Well, having the right to participate in society used to be a right. Now it's been downgraded to a privilege. And I know a lot of parents who are concerned about the vaccine, they want more data to come out, they want more research, and never before has a vaccine ever been rushed through so quickly, let alone mandated. And I feel very sad for a lot of kids who are being excluded out of extracurricular activities, swimming and sports, things like that. And then, we have to see if it's going to be mandated for school and if exemptions will be allowed.
Yes, we're going to have to do a whole show on this clearly because we didn't even get into the vaccine mandate. But let's switch gears for a second. Senator Batters, a Conservative senator, federally, has started a petition to review the leader of her own party, Erin O'Toole. I think this is unprecedented since the parties merged in the early 2000s. Brock, what's going on federally?
I think the real issue we have is Erin O'Toole has no foil. Justin Trudeau called an election to have an urgent majority, didn't get one, and then took 2 months off. I think now that Parliament's resumed, we've got an opportunity for the opposition to thrive. Erin O'Toole might actually be able to get off the front page of the newspapers as the top federal political story and let the Liberals show what they ran on. And I think that's his biggest problem is he's been at the front page and had no positive news for the past 2 months. He's got a few critics within his caucus and his party. Obviously, he failed to win a majority government or even the most seats. I think that's where he's struggling. His real trick is hold the Liberals to account over the next few weeks while Parliament's sitting, and then over the December-January recess from Parliament, get out there, win over his caucus members who didn't support him in leadership, win over his party membership, travel the country, see them face to face. It's tough to criticize someone when you've seen the whites of their eyes.
So you're not, can I summarize, say that you're not in favor of this then?
I think he's on the verge of being Andrew Scheer and forced out by not putting the effort in to keep his job. And I think that he can put the effort in and outwork his opposition and stay Conservative leader. I'm not sure whether that's the choice that the Conservative Party or Canadians want, but he's got the upper hand here.
Hannah, we have 30 seconds before commercial. Is this right for members to do this? I mean, led by a senator, but is it right? 20 seconds.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, the members are the ones who the party is accountable to, the party leadership, the party leader, all that type of thing. So I know this is kind of unprecedented, but I still think that the members should have a choice. They should have a say in who their leader is. And if they're not happy with him, then maybe a leadership review is what is needed. And I have to say, I think Erin O'Toole is afraid. He's afraid of competition inside of his own caucus, and it's a sign of weakness.
Welcome back. We're picking up our discussion right where we left off before the commercial break with the potential federal Conservative leadership review. A sitting senator has launched a potential leadership review against her own party leader, Erin O'Toole. Elliot, I want your opinion on this. You are not a Conservative Party member. You're a Liberal Party member. You've worked for various cabinet ministers. You've been a Liberal Party coordinator, organizer. I know this kind of reminds me of what we saw with the Liberals in the mid-2000s when Stephen Harper was leader of the Conservatives, and one by one after each minority, there seemed to be this turnover of leaders. Is this warranted in this situation? Does the party ever come out of this better? What is the consequence of something like this?
Well, it seems that the Conservatives are going through a little bit of an existential crisis. You know, they've had their challenge with Andrew Scheer. They're now facing a similar challenge with Erin O'Toole. It seems like the party is trying to find its heart. It's trying to find out exactly who it is. And as you go through that process, you tend to spit out leaders. They'll eventually find their footing. I have no doubt about that. That's just how the political map sort of works. You swing back from one side of the pendulum to the other. The challenge with opposition leaders is always getting attention. Unfortunately, Erin O'Toole is getting plenty of attention, but it's not the very good one. What I would suggest for him to do is just say you want a leadership review, call it, put it to the members, and by doing so, you sort of stand up to the people who are threatening you. If you lose, then you lose. Then you're probably going to eventually lose anyway. So why drag it out? And if you win, you strengthen your position to say, look, we've gone through this enough. I've put myself to the test and people have voted for me. Now get in line and let's try and focus on who we got to go after, which is Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. That would be my view, rather than taking this approach that he's taken here where he's trying to look tough, but potentially looking like he's alienating and excluding other members, which is not something you want to do as you're trying to build a winning movement.
That was very excellently well said there, Elliot. I think we don't know what'll happen, but if this drags out, we could see the death of Erin O'Toole by 100 cuts. So who knows? Okay, let's switch gears for a moment here. The TTC union, which is the Toronto Transit Commission, which is a large union that runs the subways and the bus systems in Toronto, was petitioning to have a hold on the vaccine mandate that would see so many of its employees who did not disclose their vaccine status or chose not to get vaccinated for whatever reason, to put a hold on that so that they didn't have to let all these employees go. Well, they just lost their bid, and now the TTC must actually enforce the vaccine mandate. Hannah, a lot of folks who come from the vaccine hesitant or not into the COVID vaccines, I don't like to use the word anti-vaxxer because some people really just don't like this particular vaccine, but they're okay with others. So we'll just call it that. They were really hoping that they would see a victory with one of these unions, in this case, the TTC union. Does this dash all the hopes of those who are vaccine hesitant with the COVID jab?
Well, the TTC union has vowed to keep fighting this, and I know there's like a federal case or a case about the federal employees right now that's in the courts today, and there's going to be tons of court cases about this, about the mandates, about the vaccine continually going forward. So this is not the end of the fight, and I just don't understand why it's so hard for companies and for governments and institutions to allow exemptions for the small percentage of people that do not want the vaccine. We supposedly have religious freedom on paper here in Canada, but it doesn't exist anymore in practice. So whether it is religious or creed beliefs or actual medical exemptions, and they've made the medical exemptions so hard to get that it's basically just a token that exists on paper. It doesn't exist in reality. And for people to be forced out of their jobs like this, many qualified people you cannot replace overnight. Plus, the majority of these people are not going to be eligible for EI as well, which most of those people and people who've worked a lot of years have paid into. So I don't even know why these people need to pay taxes in a sense anymore, because most of the things that we're paying into, we can't actually get anymore if you do not want this particular vaccine.
Okay, lots to unpack there. Brock, these are people's jobs, and transit workers aren't necessarily the highest paid workers in the country. For whatever reason, these people, through their conscience, decided not to get the vaccine, or not to disclose for that matter. Should they just go? Do these employees, should they be protected?
The union's job is to protect the employees. They're going through the process of trying to do it. They didn't win the last round. I'm sure we'll have more court cases over this. It's more the issue of providing a robust testing system rather than just the dispute between the 10% of the workforce that hasn't, for whatever reason, gone around to getting their vaccine. I think that that's the big challenge. Society is at loggerheads with this 10%. It has no clear path on how to convince some or many of them that the vaccine may be their best option.
Welcome back. We're with our current events panel. Elliot, just before commercial, we were talking about the TTC union losing its bid to halt the vaccine mandate. Employees will be laid off. These are not high-income earners. Many families will be impacted. Was this right?
Well, 3 points. One, vaccine mandates work to help drive up vaccination numbers, which is where we need to go. Two, as you see across North America, the numbers that we hear in the press tend to shrink considerably after you start to sort of get a little bit tougher on saying, well, you're going to have to leave your job. You saw that with the New York City Workers Union as well,
yes,
and the police union. And then third, the key that we're not remembering here, the key thing we're not remembering here is we're doing these vaccine mandates not only for COVID, but we're going to have more of these in the future. And there's a potential that they could be a lot worse than COVID. This is about getting ready for the next pandemic as well. We need to be getting comfortable and familiar with these processes so that the next time it comes around, we do it a lot more quickly.
But to me, when I hear you say that, I read that we need to be conditioned properly because you need to be ready for the next one. You need to be able to do what the government says when. I mean, some of these people really have bona fide creed concerns. They may not be comfortable from healthcare reason, one way or the other. They may have received medical advice. Of course, when people are faced with job loss, of course, they're going to really weigh their options. But should we really be forcing people into that kind of position? Is that the kind of country we want to be?
If you're asking me, I think the country we want to be is one that is safe and healthy and able to respond to serious challenges in the health space, like COVID has presented. We need to be equipped to be able to deal with this. Are there going to be some people who don't want to get shots for some reason? Absolutely. But I don't know of any religious organization who has said that we shouldn't encourage shots and for people to get vaccinated. So I think we need to be very clear in separating out the two going forward.
Okay, Hannah, I'll let you chime in and then we're going to move on to another topic.
Yes, well, we've never had 100% vaccination rates ever in the history of our country for any other vaccine before. It's always been optional. And even though it's been mandatory for certain vaccines in elementary and high school, you could always get an exemption very easily. I don't know how we went from 2 weeks to slow the spread of locking down to like, if you don't get this shot and it's all subsequent boosters, you will lose your job and we have to prepare for future pandemics. That sounds very dystopian and not like someone from a free society would say. So either we have to decide we're going to be completely totalitarian like China and like some other countries, North Korea, or we're going to still continue to be a free society like we pride ourselves here in North America, where people have choice. They have choice over their body. We have mobility rights. And I think the direction that Canada is heading with these mandates, especially because as Elliot is indicating there, it is paving the way for further mandates, which is totalitarianism. You can't say you live in a democracy anymore and have the facade of a democracy if you're going to say that people have to be injected with something or else they cannot participate in society. That's what China does. That's not what Canada does or should do.
Okay.
I don't think anyone would say that we are getting close to a totalitarian society.
Well, I mean, but you can't get a job, you can't get EI, you can't travel, you can't do all these things if you do not want a particular vaccine. Like, that's not what you do in a free country. There's choice. And there's 86% of Canadians 12 and older have gotten the vaccine. Why can't we leave the 12 or 14% alone, especially because we've reached herd immunity here in Canada? We've reached herd immunity.
Some very interesting points, and it's a lot to consider. I mean, I always err on freedom of individual choice, let people make their own decisions. But there are definitely a lot of measures being employed to encourage getting the jab. Again, I believe it's everybody's personal choice. I don't like mandates. I've always been very clear about that. I want to pivot to another COVID-related matter. We only have a minute, but one employer, Chapman's Ice Cream, which is actually not far from where I live, they have decided to positively encourage people to get the jab. So not say you're going to lose your job if you don't get it. You know, obviously that's still perhaps on the table, but we're going to give you a pay raise if you do. Is that the right way to go, Brock? I'll let you chime in. We only have 45 seconds left, unfortunately.
Your goal is to have the private sector be the ones deciding for their own workforce. We benefit from this rather than having mandates. I've heard there's been a boycott. Unfortunately, November is a terrible time for a Canadian ice cream boycott. I think that's
Okay, sorry, we have a technical issue. Hannah, I'll let you just chime in, 20 seconds.
I mean, when you're talking about the private sector doing these types of mandates, when we talk about individual businesses doing this, they still have to respect choice. So it seems like Chapman's is giving the option for people to do testing and to just wear a face shield instead if they don't want the vaccine. I still think that it's treating people as second-class citizens if they don't want the vaccine. But as long as they don't mandate it, I think that's better than some other places have done.
Okay, we've unfortunately run out of time, but a very good, lively group today. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is why I love the current events panel. We really get to flush out a lot of these issues, and clearly there was a lot brought to the table today. For Counterpoint, I'm Tanya Granick-Allen.